Welcome to Daniel's Inferno. My name is Daniel. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you have a moment, please like, subscribe, share, and join the conversation below. I'd love to hear from you. So today's video is a bit different than what I usually do. We are going to be talking about the horrific shooting that happened in Nova Scotia last weekend, from the 18th to the 19th. Now the biggest, worst massacre in Canadian history while we're dealing with a global crisis to compound things.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with breaking news out of Nova Scotia, where a gunman went on a shooting rampage. Right now, police say 14 people are dead, including the suspect. The community is in shock and the Mounties are grieving the loss of one of their own. Constable Heidi Stevenson.
2 children have lost their mother, and a husband has lost his wife. Parents have lost their daughter, and countless others lost an incredible friend and colleague.
As Nova Scotia continues to mourn the 22 slain in last weekend's mass shooting, tributes to those lost are coming in all shapes and sizes.
22 people were killed and 3 people were injured. And because of what is going on currently, I don't feel like the victims or the victims' families are getting the type of recognition that is due to them, that is owed to them. So I thought we would do a video just talking about what happened and then talking about all the information on the victims that I could find to try to venerate and give some respect to these people. So this all started on the 18th. It started when Gabriel Wortman, now I'm going to be calling him the shooter from now on, got into an altercation with his now ex-girlfriend. He tied her up. She eventually escaped and was able to hide in the woods and was eventually able to get to police and emergency responders. It was at this point that she was able to tell the police that the shooter had both an RCMP uniform and an RCMP vehicle. Now, the RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, for those of you who don't know. They're kind of our elite force here in Canada, kind of our national police. So on the 18th, the shooter around 10:26, he started a 13-hour rampage. It started in the Portapique area where more than 13 people were shot, and he then drove 43 kilometers to the Wentworth area, and it was now Sunday morning, about 9:35 in the morning, and he unfortunately shot 2 men and a woman. He set their properties on fire. He then shot a woman walking and 2 drivers. All of this within the span of about half an hour. He then drove 30 kilometers to the Debert area of Nova Scotia, where the details of what happened in that area are a bit fuzzy. He drove 51 kilometers, however, after this, the Shubenacadie area, and it was around 10:49 a.m. He then drove 24 kilometers south to Enfield, and after what happened in Enfield, he started to fill up at a gas station, and it was at this gas station at about 11:08 to 11:15, I believe, that the RCMP emergency unit saw him and got into a shootout and killed him. So let's, the worst area, well, all of it is worst, but one of the most tragic areas, in my opinion, was the area of Enfield. And so this is why. 2 RCMP officers, Constable Morrison and Officer Stevenson. Heidi Stevenson was a mother of 2, 10 and 13 years of age. She was a 23-year veteran of the RCMP. She was best known for her smile and her ability to help others. So she was set to meet with Constable Morrison. So they were going to meet. Officer Morrison sees a RCMP vehicle approaching. He believes it to be Heidi Stevenson approaching. A logical thing to think. Unfortunately, it was the shooter. The shooter immediately opened fire on Officer Morrison. Officer Morrison put his car in gear, drove away to get emergency help. While this was happening, he radioed in to tell people that a shooter had opened fire on him from an RCMP vehicle. So, Heidi Stevenson, bless her soul, she honestly was so brave to do what she did. She was going southbound, I believe, and the shooter was going northbound. She sees the car. She crashes into him to stop him. The shooter unfortunately now takes her life. He takes her gun and her ammunition, and he sets fire to both his car and another car. A passerby sees a car crash and gets out to help. He shoots the passerby and takes the passerby's vehicle. At this point, he drives to a female acquaintance house, okay? And he, you know, knocks on the door. She sees who it is. He shoots her now and takes her vehicle, transfers everything to her vehicle. So, well, in her vehicle, he decides to go to a gas station to get supplies and to fill up. And again, this is where the tactical unit saw him, uh, started a shootout, and took his life. 13-hour spree, 22 people. You know, mothers lost children, children lost parents, husbands lost wives, and wives lost husbands. It's horrible, and I'd like to talk a little bit now about the victims themselves and who they were. One of the victims was Heather O'Brien. She was a 55-year-old practical nurse. Can it's already horrible that these people's lives were taken, but when you hear about these essential workers who are already putting their lives at risk and during all of this huge crisis, it really wrenches my heart. It really does. So she was a practical nurse with 6 kids and 2 stepkids and a husband. She's best known for her love of Christmas and healing, which is why she was a nurse for so long. Now we move on to the Tuc family. It was a daughter, husband, and wife. They were encouraging people to stay home during this crisis, and he got them in their house, I believe. Christian Beaton, she was also a nurse who was pregnant, and she was on her way to her favorite patient's home. And, our hearts go out to these families, really, they do. Sean McLeod and Alana Jenkins were both correctional officers. Their house was burned down, and they had a 23-year-old daughter that they left behind. They were very passionate for their work as correctional officers and trying to work with the system to turn people around. Tom Bailey was a 70-year-old retired firefighter who passed away because he was going to a house that the shooter had set on fire to try to help people. And while he was on his way over to help, the shooter took his life. So, the amount of help that was trying to be offered throughout all of this 13 hours from people, and that help resulted, unfortunately, in them getting caught in the crossfire of a deranged lunatic. Joey Weber, he leaves a wife and 2 daughters behind, and he had just recently gotten a job. So things for this gentleman were turning around in his family. He was starting to work again, even during all of this. What's going on in the world? The Blair couple, who had 4 boys and they passed away protecting the two youngest from the shooter. That's that is real love from a parent when there's such disregard for your own safety and all that matters is your kin and what's there in front of you, your children. And honestly sounds like amazing parents to these four boys. Don and Frank had just retired and they worked at a long-term care home for quite some time. And they had just retired here, well, there in Nova Scotia. Now, Corey Ellison was visiting his father. He heard a gunshot and he went outside to help and see what was going on. Joey and Peter Bond, they died in their home together, and they were known for the love that they had for each other. John Zahl and Elizabeth Thomas one was a retired Navy officer and a teacher. They had two adopted sons, and they were the neighbors of the shooter. Lillian Heslop was a retired Yukon government worker, and she was best known for her charity in her community and organizing dinners and trying to help the homeless and just being an overall genuinely kind and loving individual. And Gina Coulee owned a dentist clinic and was a two-time cancer survivor. She loved fishing and belly dancing. All of these details, if any of them I've gotten wrong, I sincerely apologize. I worked off of the information that was provided to me from multiple news sources. If you would like to go support some of these families, they have set up GoFundMe pages and are looking for donations to help them through this horrible time. You know, how are some of these people going to cope or deal with what's going on? I can speak from experience in terms of a family member passed away back in February, and there won't be a funeral because there can't be gatherings, and the internment itself is limited to a very small number of people with, social distancing, masks, all of that. We can't gather afterwards. So this crisis really complicates the normal procedures when something tragic happens to a family member like this and you want to pay your respects. So all we can do is send our hearts and our prayers out to these families. Um, I'm a believer in God. I think the shooter is now burning in the deepest pits, and I really hope that all of these individuals are up in their rightful place in heaven and one day their families can see them again. Um, Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you thought of the video. If you have any details or information that you found that you think I left out, please, I'd love to see it so I can try to do as much respect to these individuals as possible. And again, please, if you're able, look for these GoFundMes that these families have set up. It's a very trying and difficult time for many of them.
Here's a little goodnight song to all our friends and family. We miss you. From the McCulleys. I know you belong to somebody new, but tonight you belong to me. Although we're apart, you're a part Good night.